Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. I'm honored to introduce you to a governor. He is the governor of the great state of Vermont. His name is Peter Shumlin, and I am glad you are on the program. Welcome to California. We appreciate it.
It's great to be here. I couldn't be farther from home and still be in America.
I was going to say you are on the exact opposite side of the country. Why don't you tell us a bit about your great state, about your governorship? You're a newly elected governor.
Well, you know, democracy works in Vermont like no other place for the simple reason that literally to decide a town school budget or a local town community budget, Vermonters get together in town halls, churches on the second Tuesday in March.
Literally.
And bicker over whether to buy a new lawnmower for the school, whether they get the school budget approved, whether the French teacher gets her job. It's pretty interesting. So it's really participatory democracy at its best.
And what's also interesting is, I had mentioned to you, we have 40 state senators in California. They each represent about 800,000 constituents. The state of Vermont, 650,000.
650,000,
So you really are engaging in hand-to-hand combat.
Hand-to-hand democracy.
Yeah.
You know, everyone meets their governor, they know me, I got my phone in a phone book, you name it, if you want to get me, you get me. And you know, my argument about democracy in America today and why we're so discouraged generally about the inaction of progress in Washington, the money in politics, is that democracy was actually sort of founded on the notion that we would have politicians like this, that you can call up, that you can talk to, that you can meet. It wasn't supposed to be 60-second sound bites driven by corporate money where we call corporations citizens. I mean, you know, so it works in Vermont.
I mean, Vermont, one of the first states in our union, and it never has grown to this huge metropolis like some of the neighboring states, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut.
Absolutely.
I do want to talk to you about how Vermont, in a lot of ways, has become a forerunner as it relates to what someone called progressive causes throughout our nation. I want to focus on, at first, the Affordable Care Act, which some people know as Obamacare. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act, upheld the individual mandate. But as it relates to, I believe it's Medicaid, it gave the states the option to opt in or out of this federal program. Now, in California, we had a Republican governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I guess prospectively opted in.
Right.
He already set up the plan. What's Vermont going to do?
Well, we not only opting in, but we are actually requiring that businesses of 50 or fewer employees buy their insurance through the exchange. Let me talk about what the challenge is here.
Sure.
Because it's no different than California. I just argue that we're doing things in Vermont that other politicians don't have the courage to do. Here's where the challenge is. Twofold. First, with our hearts. We know that we have in Vermont 45,000 uninsured Vermonters, folks that know that if they get sick, they're in big trouble. Second, we have 160,000 underinsured Vermonters, and you've got them all over California. Folks whose gap between their coverage and their deductible is so big that if they really get sick, curtains, they're bankrupt, they're in huge trouble. So that's our heart. In Vermont, we believe we take care of each other. Vermonters generally believe take care of neighbor, take care of friends. We want to fix that challenge.
But it's interesting you mentioned that Vermont is requiring smaller businesses, under 50 employees, to provide insurance. Because as part of the ACA, these small businesses are not required to offer insurance. So that's a big step.
Let me tell you why we're doing it. We see the Affordable Care Act, which is a huge help to us, and I believe all the other states, as a phase one on our march to real health care reform. What does it do for Vermont? As I mentioned, it gets health insurance to folks who otherwise couldn't get it. If you make $97,000 a year or less in a family, you're going to get a subsidy through the Affordable Care Act. That's the best kept secret in America. If you make $47,000 or less as a single individual, you're going to get a subsidy. So what we're trying to do is drive everybody into the exchange so that we can have as many lives in that exchange as possible, and we can draw down as many federal dollars to help us with the cost of health care.
The intent is the exchange will be that bargaining arm.
It's basically an internet to purchase health insurance with a subsidy if you make $97,000 a year or less.
I do want to ask you about Vermonters and their sense of the Affordable Care Act, because I look at the same polls I'm sure you do, and it seems as if since the Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act, that the opposition that was so palpable has waned a bit.
It has, and I think as people figure out that they're going to get help, that it's a positive thing, that it's a way of getting the insurance companies off your back and getting you affordable health care, more people are figuring out this makes a lot of sense. But let me tell you what's wrong with it. and why we call it the first phase of a two-phase reform in Vermont. What's wrong with it is the same mistake that is made with every political effort to deal with health care in America, which is that we expand coverage to the uninsured without doing anything about cost containment, delivering better quality health care for less money. And let me just tell you how the math works in Vermont. I was talking about our hearts a second ago.
Right.
Now I want to appeal to your head. As Bill Clinton would say, let's do the arithmetic.
Right, he did.
In Vermont, where Vermonters on average are making the same money they were making a decade ago, because working Americans have stagnant incomes in this terrible recession. By 2015, Vermonters will be spending, at the current rates of growth in healthcare, $2,500 a head for every living Vermonter that we're not spending on healthcare today.
Look,
that's in 3 years.
Right. There's no doubt in California, throughout the nation, healthcare costs have risen much faster than inflation.
And we can't keep up.
It's undeniable.
We can't keep up.
Now,
So what we're doing with it,
please.
let me just finish on phase two, is we are going to use the Affordable Care Act as a pipeline to a single-payer healthcare system, where healthcare is a right and not a privilege, where it follows the individual and isn't required by the employer, so that we remove it from the burden of employment and job creation, and most importantly, where we use our healthcare dollars to make Vermonters healthy. Preventative care, good outcomes, fee-for-service out the door, outcomes-based payments as the way of reimbursing our providers, and we think that's going to be the model for the country to deliver smart, affordable healthcare, universal access, publicly financed, less money spent for better healthcare outcomes.
I'm sure you know those are fighting words to some folks in this nation.
You bet.
I mean, that is the kind of boogeyman, socialized Canadian, British, European medicine. There had been attempts to pass a single-payer plan in California. They had been vetoed by our governor in the last decade. In the 90s, we heard a lot about single-payer during the years that President Clinton, Mrs. Clinton were looking toward health care reform. I mean, are you going to see that kind of opposition that we've seen to, for example, the Affordable Care Act?
Oh, you bet. I'm running for election right now. I'm up in November. And, you know, the insurance companies, the special interests, the folks that are making so much money off our healthcare system, they love it just the way it is. They want to keep it just the way it is. The challenge is neither business nor the middle class can afford it the way it is. There's two facts that matter in this discussion. We have to remember that in America, we spend more on healthcare than any of the people that we compete with for jobs in any other developed country, 200 to 300% more, and we have lousier outcomes. Americans are less healthy.
But what about choice? I think that's the biggest concern, that if all of a sudden we adopted a Canadian-style single-payer plan, we won't have the choices in practitioners, we'll have to wait in line, if we need elective or semi-elective surgery.
I've heard that. That's what the special interests say. Too bad none of it's true. Listen, Medicare is a single-payer healthcare system.
It is.
Most of us can't wait to get there. But what we're doing in Vermont, what I would argue is that the current system rations care. The current system in Vermont, I can tell you this is true, doesn't allow choice. Because you have an insurance company bureaucrat, when you're really sick, telling your provider, who is trained to make you better, knows how to make you better, is making the right judgment about making you better, on their back saying, wait a minute, we want to deny coverage or slow coverage because this is going to cost us too much money.
I want to ask you about Medicare. Because as you know, the Romney-Ryan ticket have adopted a plan, they're proposing a plan, which would create a voucher system for Medicare, give seniors a voucher, and then they could use that voucher to obtain the care that they need. What's your sense of that plan?
It's a disaster, and let me tell you why. What's driving our healthcare costs in this country are a lot of factors, but one of them is that a system of underinsurance or lack of insurance drives people to catastrophic care instead of preventative care. Now, why does that matter? The reason we have such bad outcomes in America is because we reward our providers for quantity of service instead of quality of service. And our consumers have to wait until they're really sick so they can get in the free emergency care door when they're really down and out. That is a disastrous way to deliver medicine. If you design this system from scratch, say, hey, let's design a healthcare system for America, and you design the system we have, where we have these for-profit insurance companies making money, saying no to preventative care, and worse yet, ensuring that it costs you more because you got to wait till you get catastrophic care, you'd say to the people who design it, hey, listen, you know, go to a sunny room somewhere facing south. When you feel better, come on out.
How does a voucher cause that?
What the voucher does is it forces you to limit the amount of money you spend when you can't afford health care. That makes sense for unnecessary work. but it makes no sense for the things that avoid cost, which is preventative care. The Affordable Care Act makes preventative care, your annual, your annual exam, your breast mammogram, all those procedures free for millions, 54 million Americans. But the point is, if we give an incentive for Americans to do prevention, diet, exercise, all the things that we know work, eat Vermont-grown products instead of products from other states, if you do all that, you'll have a healthier outcome. And what the voucher does is discourage that kind of preventative care.
Governor, to say that you have been a forerunner in the fight for marriage equality could only be described as an understatement. When you were the Senate president in 2000, you sponsored the bill to support civil unions. In 2009, you were instrumental in passing a law that created marriage equality. In 2011, you were the first governor to officiate over a same-sex marriage ceremony. To some, they see you as a hero for that. To others, they see you as a villain. Talk to me about that fight that you have engaged in over the last 12 or so years.
Well, I got to tell you first that it was rooted in this simple fact. When I used to drop my kids off at school in Vermont, my oldest daughter had very good friends who had two moms. And they'd walk up the steps to school together, and I wondered aloud and with my daughters why it was that their mom and dad didn't have the rights that I had with my daughters. So I got involved with that issue on the grassroots. Now, in Vermont, I happened to be Senate president when we got a court order to pass some kind of marriage equality. We invented civil unions at that time because there was an incredible outbreak, first state in the country to do this. Howard Dean was governor. I was Senate president. We had a Democratic speaker. We passed it and called it something else. And when we did that, I felt very strongly that separate but not equal wasn't going to work. So I promised to my friends, listen, this is a first step. We may not survive this. I was very political about it.
Sure.
But here's my promise to you. I will get marriage equality passed in Vermont before we're done. We did it, and 10 years later I came back as Senate president, sponsored the first marriage equality bill in the country that passed because it was the right thing to do, not because judges were telling us to do it.
But did you ever expect to be this warrior in the fight for marriage equality? I mean, it's a strange mantle to take up when you are not a part of that community. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it is an interesting mantle to kind of take up. It's not your fight, one could argue.
Let me tell you my view of public service. I'm a business person. I'm born and raised in Vermont, grew up without much and built a couple of companies. My view of public service is different than many politicians. I'm not in public service because I want to get reelected. I'm in public service because I want to get something done, and I want to get a lot done. And when I see a wrong, I want to right it. When I see a system that's not working, I want to fix it. And my view is, I will continue to tell, I'm the only governor in the country that got up on TV, a candidate, and said, you elect me governor and we're going to pass single-payer health care. You elect me governor and we're going to pass marriage equality. So, politicians don't like to do that kind of thing. My view of public service is, if we had more politicians who would tell the public what they're going to do, why they're going to do it, and even if you disagree with them, I find Vermonters respect me because I'm willing to do the tough things and do what I say.
In your re-election battle now, are you being called to the mat for these bold positions?
Oh, you bet. And frankly, my opponent has a lot of funding from the for-profit insurance companies. And on the healthcare battle, single payer, the insurance companies of special interest, they don't really care about the little state of Vermont. The 650,000 people having a single-payer healthcare system.
Precedent.
What they're afraid of is, if the pony gets out of the shed in the state of Vermont, the stallion might get out of the barn in California or New York. And frankly, every time I see Governor Brown or Governor Cuomo, they ask me what we're doing on single payer. And frankly, the insurance companies are right. We're going to get this done right in Vermont. The rest of the country will follow.
Governor Shumlin, thank you so much for joining us from the great state of Vermont. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Ricardo Lara. He is running for the California State Senate. If he's elected, he will be the first man of color who is out to join that body. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're speaking with Ricardo Lara. He's a member of the California State Assembly. He is running for the California State Senate. And Assemblyman, we just spoke with the governor of Vermont, and as you may know, he signed a marriage equality bill in 2009. He was the first governor to officiate over a same-sex marriage ceremony in 2011. I know that you are a supporter of marriage equality. So how does that make you feel to learn about the steps that the governor of Vermont has taken?
I'm elated. I think it's amazing the work that he's done, and I applaud him and congratulate him. I wish we can do that in California. And I feel that we need to do more, and we need to continue to work towards marriage equality here in California.
And let's talk about California, because I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. In 2008, I had two friends, they're gay men, they've lived their lives together, and it was the Friday before the election, and they decided that they needed to get married with our rabbi. I'm a Jewish American. I said, don't worry, you don't need to worry about it. There's no way Prop 8 will pass. I'm a neutral observer, but I just didn't see it in the tea leaves. They were right. I mean, Prop 8 did pass, and it overturned marriage equality in our state. 4 years later, where do you see Californians in terms of marriage equality? Do you think these 4 years have changed the minds of Californians?
Absolutely. I think these past 4 years have been actually critical in educating all Californians on the importance of marriage equality and the importance of allowing folks to love who they want to love. And I think, in particular, I could speak to myself in the Latino community. We've done a tremendous amount of outreach, and now you see that the community is 50-50 split. And
I do want to talk to you about the Latino community, because it is one that is so interesting in terms of its views as a community. You know, it tends to be very blue in terms of its voting, but on social issues, not so much. You know, in 2008, under Prop 8, if I remember correctly, the Latino community voted in favor of it.
Right.
And so that, you know, caused a lot of pain for a lot of people who were opposed to Prop 8.
Well, you know, I have a lot of opinions on that. I could tell you that I think the campaign that was run really poorly in the Latino community. But I can also tell you that in these past 4 years, there's been important conversations that have happened in which we're actually talking to Latino voters, and not only talking to them, but showing them who we are as LGBT Americans. And I think little by little we're changing attitudes, and we've seen that now the Latino community, especially within the younger voters.
And it's interesting, I think about you, you're an out Latino. Robert Garcia, member of the Long Beach City Council, an out Latino male. And so just in this community right now, we're in Long Beach today, there are Latino gay leaders that are standing up and talking and really trying to explain to the community at large who you are, what you are, how you're not really that different from anyone else, presumably.
Right.
How are those conversations going?
They're going great. I mean, I think the important thing to do is to present ourselves in a way that people know who we genuinely are. And we're just like everybody else. We want to work hard. We come from hardworking families. And all the research that we've seen shows that if we get to the mom, we talk to the Latina mom.
Oh, that's interesting.
She transforms the family.
But what about the Latina mom in the Inland Empire? What about the Latina mom in Northern California, above San Francisco, above Sacramento? Can you get to them, metaphorically speaking?
Absolutely, because we see that the next generation of Latinos don't see this as an issue. They care about the environment, they care about creating jobs, they care about healthcare. Social issues such as marriage equality are not important to them. They feel that everybody should have the right to marry who they love and really believe in equality. And so I think we need to continue to do much more work in the Latino community. You know, people like City Council member Robert Garcia and I are leading the way in terms of talking to our community.
And what's interesting, and I was shocked when you told me this, presuming you are successful in November in your state Senate race, you will become the first LGBT male, or LGBT period, of color in the California State Senate.
Yeah, I will be the first openly gay person of color in the history of the California State Senate.
How does that make you feel? I mean, you're just you know, you live in your body every day, but it really is a big deal. In 100 years it won't be, but it is today.
Right. I take it very seriously, especially when we're trying to fight for marriage equality. We're trying to continue to pursue laws that promote equality and that ensure fairness for all Californians, but also for our kids. We see that LGBT kids of color are susceptible to depression, alcoholism,
suicide.
and suicide. And so it's important for me as an openly gay Latino man to ensure that they get to see other role models. They get to see folks that are following their dreams.
What would you say to those that would say, look, marriage, it's a God-given institution. It's an institution between a man and a woman, and I don't think we should complicate it by allowing 2 men or 2 women to get married. How do you respond to that? I'm not taking a position, I'm just asking.
Well, as a public official and as a legislator, I believe in the separation of church and state. And I have to look out for all Californians from a wide variety of religious views. And so my view is to treat everybody equally.
So should maybe the state get out of the marriage business?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting thought. It would be worth some
consideration.
Right.
You know, if one church wants to marry you, great, and then the state accepts that marriage certificate.
That's very interesting. That would be something.
Who would have thunk? I actually thought of something original, although I didn't. I've heard it before. I've heard it before, I must say. I also want to speak with you about the LGBTQ American Bill of Rights. It was a resolution that were you the sponsor of
Yes.
it? Co-sponsor, sponsor?
I was the author.
Author of it. Passed the legislature in August. Tell us about this.
Well, you know, we felt it was important. You know, in California, we've been the vanguards and leaders in ensuring that LGBT Californians have the rights that they deserve. And so we felt that as Californians travel throughout the country, they're susceptible to laws that will discriminate against them. So we felt it was important to develop and draft a resolution that would urge the president and Congress to ensure that LGBTQ was included in our current civil rights laws to ensure that, you know, LGBTQ Americans have every right as every American.
It's interesting because as I understand it, under federal law, the gay and lesbian community do not have the same protections as folks of color, creed, religion, and so certain discrimination is permitted by omission.
Absolutely.
The challenge becomes, look, I mean, we are a divided nation. You know, the red states are very red, the blue states are very blue. And how, you know, if the position is that you want complete equality, how do you talk to your friends that may be from red states in the South or in the Midwest? I mean, it's a very different America.
It is. But time and time again, if people get to know LGBT folks, if they understand who they are, they're in their family, their relatives, and they have a conversation with them, they get to know them, they demystify whatever misconception they have of the LGBTQ community. And so we have to continue to do the work. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'm saying the opportunity always presents itself to be able to have an understanding conversation about who we are as humans and who we are as Americans.
At the same time, we know that courts in California and other states have struck down attempts to limit marriage equality. It's hard to know what will happen if and when a case like that goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. But for argument's sake, let's say that we need to bring the issue, if those, when I say we, I mean your community, needs to bring the issue before the voters in California to reverse Proposition 8. When does that happen? Are you ready to fight that fight?
Well, you know, that's the magic question, right? I mean, when is an appropriate time to take this to the voters? I think personally,
because there was a thought to do it this year.
Right. I think personally we need some more time. I think we need to continue to educate voters. We need to have an actual strategy that is that really understands our diverse communities and that really goes out and actually has conversations with people.
It is interesting because one would have thought that communities of color would have been supportive of marriage equality, given that the gay and lesbian community is also a minority community. Yet the Latino community, as I mentioned, voted against Prop 8. The African American community really voted against Prop 8. I mean, that was quite a surprise for many looking at the tea leaves.
Well, I think the mistake we did was to assume that we were going to be able to get these other communities just on the civil rights argument without really understanding the community, the context of what we're talking about. And so I think we've done a much better job of actually having people that look like me in the Latino community, having African American leaders in the African American community talking about marriage equality. I think that's something that didn't happen before Prop 8, and it's a learning lesson.
Let me ask you, and I'm just going to say it very succinctly, why is marriage equality important to you? I mean, in some ways, hey, be careful what you wish for. You know, you have to get divorced, and there are a lot of, you know, other attributes attached to marriage. Why is it important to you?
It's important to me because as a person that comes from a disenfranchised community and has fought all my life for equality for everyone, that I ensure that everybody has that right. If they so choose to marry, we should allow them to.
What if, there are certain states, they have civil unions that have every single attribute attached to a gay couple except the name marriage? Hospital benefits, death benefits. Why is it the word marriage is so critical?
Because I think that the word marriage symbolizes the unity of two people that love each other. And something that is so special like that should be granted and given to everybody who chooses to be married and love who they want to love. And so, I support civil unions, I support marriage, and I want to make sure that at the end of the day, that every taxpayer in this country has the equal rights as everybody else.
Right. Okay. Presume you are victorious in November. You enter the state Senate after, is it 2 years or 4 years in the Assembly?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, so it's a nice big jump for you. What are your goals as you would enter the California State Senate?
My goals in the Senate is going to be to do the same work that I've been doing in the Assembly, ensuring that we keep our local governments honest, that we continue to tackle this issue of redundant regulations on our small businesses, and that we continue to fight for educational equity for every Californian.
It's interesting because the bodies have kind of flip-flopped in terms of collegiality or lack thereof. And it does seem that the state Senate, as we speak today, is a more collegial body. And it seems that, at least on the Democratic side, I understand that you are a Democrat, more moderate than the Assembly. You just voiced, fairly moderate views as it relates to regulation. There are some people who are on the left wing of the spectrum that would believe that, the more regulation, the better. Is this a shift that as you look towards the Senate, you want to start looking more towards moderation?
Well, I don't want to fall into moderate.
I understand,
liberal, but I think we have to do a much better job of making it easy to do business in California. If we're going to succeed as a state and continue to be one of the largest economies in the world, business has to thrive. And if business thrives, then we're able to promote and create those programs that are important for our most vulnerable Californians.
And what's interesting is you're not the only Democrat that has said that. And Republicans say it as well. So there is bipartisan support on regulatory reform. We've seen a little with CEQA, but that was really focused on a football stadium. Will we see more bona fide regulatory reform? Because, look, California has become the poster child for overregulation. On taxes, it seems as if we're not the poster child, that if you really look at it, if you look at credits and everything, we're kind of in the middle. But on regulation, it's not a pretty picture.
Well, I think it's something we need to look at, especially for those small businesses. The 50th district, which I represent now, the backbone of that economy are small mom and pop shops who every day, talk to me about some regulation they have to adhere to, and if they don't, there's a huge fine.
Right.
And so we need to look at that. And in areas that I represent now that you have 17, 20% unemployment, I have to ensure that we cut down on the regulation and create more jobs.
So are you excited, presuming you're victorious? It is a different body, half the number in the Assembly. It's a very different group.
I feel very blessed and honored to be moving into the Senate. I've worked in the legislature for over 13 years as a staffer. I worked for Speaker Fabian Nunez, for Senator Marco Firebaugh, and it's been a great journey for me. I love this job and I love being in public service.
His name is Ricardo Lara, member of the California State Assembly. He is looking to join the California State Senate by his election in November. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching California Edition.